Hello. We're Miwk Publishing, which we set up a year ago, and we've only been selling for the last 6 months, but doing good so far. Got 8 books out, covering film and TV, which is what we're trying to cover generally. We want to cover the films and TV series that wouldn't normally get a book released about them. So we've covered
the ones nobody wants.
Well, no, the ones that people do want, but not a lot of people want. That's the thing. So we covered Doom Watch. What's that mean? They're going to talk next. We've covered Doom Watch so far. We've got books in the pipeline for, well, he's still got books to announce themselves. We've got a biography of Kit Pedler, who created Doom Watch. We've also got books out on Blake 7, Carry On, which Andy wrote. What's the other one? Skins, which again was one we didn't realise people would be after. But let's cover yours.
Okay.
Andy's got one book out at the moment, which is Carry On, Confidential. Would you like to explain what makes that unique?
Yes. Carry On Confidential, which is available upstairs, is a... it's probably a slightly nerdier guide to the Carry On films than has been released before. It takes the idea of trying to find trivia about the films to a fairly extreme level. You've got little QR codes for every location that was used in the films, which you can scan with your phone, and it will sat-nav you to every location that was used in the Carry On films. I list out when the films got their TV premieres, when they how many different versions of the DVDs and videos came out over the years, as well as the usual reviews and comments and sort of facts and figures and biographies of the stars. It's I ran the Carry On website. In fact, I still run the Carry On website for about. It's been going for over 20 years now, and a lot of the stuff that fans were asking when they posted to the website kind of informed the nature of the book, and also the fact that because the website's been going for so long, I've read and reviewed and been involved in so many other books about the Carry-Ons over the years, that the idea behind Carry On Confidential was to take all of the questions that hadn't been asked in any of those books up until now and put them in one big fact-packed Saddo's guide, really, let's be honest, Saddo's guide to the Carry On films, and that's really what it is.
Should we ask them in the corridor to shut up?
Yeah, shall we?
Before we go
Shut up!
further, do you want to tell
Can
these
we have
people
some
what
quiet
your
in the
full names
corridor,
are?
please?
Nah.
Oh yeah, I'm Andy Davidson, by the way. Hello. This is Matt West,
Matt West.
and this is John Williams.
And since we're talking about John Williams, let's kick off with your book. John's been in London now for 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, something like
Researching.
that. Yeah, not just living in
Yeah.
skips and things like that.
Various boxes.
Under a bridge.
Yeah, well, I've been working on the book. The book, which has been announced now for the first time, is a biography of Malcolm Hulke, who's predominantly famous as a Doctor Who writer, but he also wrote that sort of the television work as well. And one of the reasons that we wanted to cover this, I mean, I think there's a real market for interesting, kind of more in-depth things on some of the Doctor Who figures from the past, particularly with the revival of interest in the series, with the new series as well. And Hulke is an interesting writer because most people know of him. Basically, all they know about Malcolm Hulke is that he wrote some Doctor Who's, he created the Sea Devils, the Silurians, and various other monsters that are still used in the programme today, and that he was a member of the Communist Party of Great Britain out of push. That's basically pretty much all that people know about him. And this has led to a lot of maybe slightly over-analysis of some of his work in the light of those pieces of information. I was a huge fan of Hulke, particularly because of the novelisations that he wrote. There's a certain generation of people, of which I'm one, that grew up with the novelisations before the DVDs, before you could just watch the stories again. And they were very free adaptations in the early days of Doctor Who novelisations. So his version of Doctor Who and the Silurians, called The Doctor and the Cave Monsters, changed the story quite fundamentally. But along with Terence Dicks, I think Hulke was the main writer at the start. And there's really interesting kind of works that he did there. And I think it repaid some investigation into his life. And what I've been doing is I've tracked down members of Hulke's family that are still surviving. I've managed to actually, through those contacts, get access to a number of Hulke's letters, certainly none of which would have ever seen the light of day before. I'm also in touch with some German connections of Hulke, who in fact became the inheritors of his estate, and there's a lot of interesting stories there actually, which is nice. And also, I won't go into too much detail about it, so I want to give it away. There's some interesting stuff to do with the Home Office that I've been talking to them about Hulk recently. And he was also involved with various things. He was involved with a left-wing theatre group called Unity Theatre. He's very heavily involved in the Writers Guild with David Whittaker, another Doctor Who writer. And he lived for many years in Hampstead. He was basically lodging with some very high-ranking members of the Communist Party of Great Britain at the time, quite famous in left-moving circles. So there are actually some really interesting things about Hulk, and he had a really fascinating childhood as well, with a mother who, to call her a black sheep is, kind of like, is very mild indeed. There's an incredible amount of stuff about his mother. I've also located some rather nice photographs, since Hulk isn't exactly the most photographed person in the world. You always see about the same. Yeah, you also see the same two kind of photos of him. I've found a lot of interesting things there. And what I'm pleased about is, even though the book is called Mac, because everybody used to call him Mac, it's called Mac, the life and work of Malcolm Hulk. What I'm pleased about is that I've already identified enough here, I think, that the life aspect of the book is going to be really significant, rather than at first, when I started out, the idea that we can't really find anything out about him at all, because it was very much a blank sheet of paper. That has blossomed and developed, which is good, because even though I will be paying some analysis of not just the Doctor Who things, far from it, covering his whole career, including his later career, when he took a quite odd, on the face of it, kind of move into reference books, and completely from wildly different things, like books about Parliament to books about alternative health, and really and books about conference centres as well, which is quite odd. So he kind of took this very strange diversion, and I've actually talked to a few people about that as well as things like the making of Doctor Who, which he worked on, and those kind of reference works, which were, with the novelisations, were a really kind of like big part of that. So I will be looking at those, but the life is a really, really interesting life, and I hope people are going to enjoy it, not just necessarily for Doctor Who fans, but also for anybody with interest in archive television, because he worked on some, again, quite interesting programmes who in themselves have quite an interesting tale, such as, for instance, United, the football soap opera that the BBC did in the mid-60s, none of which survives at all. 150 episodes. I think there's about 10 seconds of an off-reel or something like that exists about that. And there's actually been some I've done some interesting, I think, research at the Written Archive Centre to tell the story of some of those programmes as well along the way. So that's the book, and that should be out next summer.
We should really look into reprinting that book about conference centres.
Yeah, well, actually though, that's an interesting one, because one thing I'm still on the case of, there is a finished magnum opus somewhere of Hulk's that he was writing right up until the time he died, and his agent definitely announced at one point that they had it and all it needed was editing before it could be released. And he mentions it a few times, and I'm currently in talks with the old agents to see if we can find anything.
What is it?
Because that would be, well, I won't go into too much detail, but it's a novel about airships.
Wow.
Okay.
Which is, so we'll see if anything comes of that.
More saleable than conference centres.
It's called Please Bring Your Towel, I think, that book about conference centres. It's not exactly the most interesting part of his writing career, I don't think, but worth a mention.
Cool.
Definitely.
So that's John's book. And Andy's is also on a cult TV series. It's not much of a secret, though, is it?
No. I didn't realise it was meant to be a secret, and I've got a pretty big mouth, as anyone who knows me will testify. So I've been blabbing on about my book for since you forced me to write it, really, which was back in February. My next book is called Jaunt, and it's a companion to the TV series The Tomorrow People, which is a show I would argue fairly strongly is very misunderstood by audiences.
Did you hear that laugh of derision across the room?
It's like Kevin laughing as well.
Try harder.
This will be good. Come on then, Andy.
No, it is. Okay, so the book itself takes an in-depth look at the Tomorrow People, the TV series from the 70s, at the revival in the 1990s. And the story behind that revival, and I'll come to that in a moment. And then also the big Finish stories of the 2000s, and then the section which I've just finished working on this week, which it's taken over my life really, is the comic strip adventures of the Tomorrow People, which ran for I think 7 years in Look-In magazine. The thing about the Tomorrow People, and I'm going to really try and sell it here, the thing about the Tomorrow People is, in spite of itself, it was a great show. At the core of the Tomorrow People was some fantastic ideals. The guy that created the show was very much into progressive ideas about how children should be educated and raised, about the authority of parents and the role of parents in the family, and the role of children in the family. And all of this is informed by the guy, obviously, his name is Roger Price. In case I didn't mention it, I don't think I did. Roger Price has a fascinating background. His father was a ghostwriter of biographies for the Hollywood stars, and I mean the big Hollywood stars. His father ghostwrote Greta Garbo's autobiography. King Farouk of Egypt, of Sudan.
I've got that. It's a great book.
It's a great book. It's a cracking read. But I mean, he was getting paid back in the day when he was writing this, and living in Hollywood and travelling all over the world, chauffeur-driven limousines. His father was, living in some of the most expensive houses in the world with all of these Hollywood stars, writing their stories, getting paid £0.50 a word, which is, I don't know how that translates to now, but it's millions. I mean, he was a seriously wealthy writer. His name doesn't appear on anything because everything was ghostwritten. But Roger Price basically lived a nomadic childhood, being dragged around all of this luxury. And as he was doing it, was put in some international schools. And this was after the war, of course. So he got to meet an awful lot of people from very different backgrounds around the world who had been oppressed. They came from countries which had been razed to the ground by the Nazis, and developed this idea of equality, of social equality, obviously racial equality, and of how societies are unfair to minorities, but particularly how that informs the life of underprivileged children. And all of these ideas came together to make this series, which, let's be honest, isn't the most well executed series at times. But beyond it, there are some incredibly powerful ideas if you can just see beyond the Silver Lame hot pants. So I'm focusing a lot on the early days of the Tomorrow People and the creation of the series and how it came about, because it really does tell the story of Thames Television to a degree in the early 1970s. Thames TV had never done a sci-fi show. It was their first experience of doing sci-fi. And they basically nicked a director from Doctor Who to help them learn all of these techniques. CSO and chroma key as it was called then. And the whole idea of how you make a science fiction television program, not just for kids, but for any audience. Admittedly, the results were variable in the early days, but it got to the point after a couple of years of the Tomorrow People where the BBC were ringing up. Verity Lambert actually rang Roger Price to ask how they achieved some of the special effects that the show was doing by its third or fourth year. I'm going to get really... I know some faces in the audience. I know you're all nerds as well, so I'll say it anyway. There was one particular effect where Roger Price developed a technique where you could have somebody jaunting in and out of the screen. So somebody would disappear at the same time as you had two other people in separate shots moving around and doing their thing. So you effectively had three separate shots locked together, where different action on different cameras was being brought together onto the screen to make one particular image. Now, there may have been fringing, it may have looked amateurish, but this sort of technique had never been done before. And they were really pioneering a lot of the special effects that we take for granted now in the early days with the Tomorrow People. So it's a bad show, it's a maligned show, it's an underwritten, under-budgeted, under-executed show at times, but the story behind how it came about is fascinating. And also, when I was first approached to write the book by Matt, I really didn't... Yeah, basically, yeah. I really didn't know that much about it. So I wasn't a fan of the Tomorrow People. I'd seen a few episodes when I was a kid, but I certainly hadn't watched that many. I'm a dedicated fan of the show now. I absolutely adore the early series. I love the comic strips. I'm afraid I hate the 90s series. It was awful. And the Big Finish stories, which were so cruelly curtailed because of a supposed remake that was going to happen, really took these mad old sci-fi adventures from the 70s and brought them into the modern day and created some really great tales. So I'll also be explaining what the Big Finish stories were about, how they developed the Tomorrow People, and where they would have gone, because a number of stories were recorded but not released, had the deal with Thames Fremantle not gone ahead and basically cut their story short. So a complete guide.
And it's worth mentioning as well that you've got the full involvement of Roger Price
Absolutely.
and
Yeah, absolutely.
many others with this.
Yeah, Roger
Can you
Price
mention the
and
script as well?
I think we can.
I think
I
we can
think we
mention
can. Oh, we'll mention the script. Yeah, Roger Price is fully on board with the book. He's got a reputation as being an elusive character. I've not really found that myself. We've had a number of very, very, very long conversations, to the point where my wife, when I know he's going to ring, my wife won't go anywhere near me or answer the phone or even be in the house, because interviews with Roger tend to take sort of a minimum of 5 hours. So we've spent a lot of time with Roger. Ruth Boswell's involved in the book, and I've spent a lot of time talking to her. I've interviewed a number of the Tomorrow People, old and new, not the 90s guys, because, as I say, I don't like that series. But a lot of the guys involved in the Big Finish stories, Nicholas Young, Mike Holloway, Peter Vaughan Clark, and Elizabeth Dare, have all been incredibly generous in giving their time to the book. I've been given a script for what would have been the 9th series of the classic, and I classic with a capital C, 70s Tomorrow People, which never actually happened. I've got the first story that would have appeared in that series, and that's going to be in the book as well. So there's some real gems for Cults TV fans, and particularly Tomorrow People fans.
And yeah, I think we covered the 2 books
I
we wanted
think we've
to push
done that.
today. We've got other books due 2013 at the moment. We actually have 2014 more sewn up than 2013 at the moment. The trouble with doing these books is there's sometimes rights issues with people. So some things are confirmed, some things are unconfirmed. But for 2014 at the moment, we've definitely got a Robin of Sherwood book coming out. Possibly 2 Robin of Sherwood books coming out, which sounds like overkill. But they'll both tackle it from 2 different angles. But not quite got that firmed up yet. But that will be sold at the convention in 2014 as well, which Barnaby Eaton-Jones is organising, which stands to be one heck of a convention. He's got both the Robins confirmed, most of the cast, and even Clannad playing in the evening. So that's going to be quite an event.
One to avoid.
Yeah, possibly.
I should just add, actually, talking about estates and the kind of cooperation, the story of Malcolm Hulke's estate is actually going to be a part of the book itself, because it's actually quite involved and quite fascinating in its own right, and also reveals an awful lot about Hulke. I am in touch with the people who own the rights to the estate, and very confident of the fact that the book will be written with the full cooperation of them. It's a complicated area. So much agency. Who are ostensibly, they're called the Agency London, ostensibly the rights holders. I ended up at the end of that phone call, them asking me that if I managed to track them down, the real rights holders, then could they let them know their address. So I ended up actually kind of in the end giving the information back to them, which was quite interesting. But yeah, that's all. So all the kind of obviously things like use of unpublished letters, of which there are many, that will all be done with the estate's approval.
Any unpublished scripts?
No, not yet.
Keep asking.
Well, the problem with unpublished scripts, of course, is that when you go to the BBC Written Archive, because he did do work for Doomwatch, he was commissioned for Doomwatch, he was commissioned for Counter-Strike, all of this will be covered. But of course, the BBC, one of the strict things about copyright is that they return the scripts, they can't wait, even the synopses often. They're straight back to their author, and it just depends. I am in touch with the person who was very close to Hulke towards the end of his life, and as is aware when you're interviewing people, she had a tantalising moment where she said, I have got quite a lot of things that Mac left when he died in my loft. And at that point I tried not to get, you kind of like go, yes, as you tend to do at this point.
He died in your loft?
Well, exactly. So I'm going to see her, and you never know what's going to crop up, basically. Fantastic. You never know what people might have. But
his mug collection.
If I can get access to his for the agent that he had at the time when he was alive, the correspondence file, then that could reveal some interesting stuff.
Cool.
But it's all ongoing.
Excellent. And with the Tomorrow People book as well, it's worth noting that the Big Finish plays that you're covering, they've been unavailable to buy for how long?
Oh God! I mean, they were removed from sale as soon as I think the last story was 2007, and basically what happened was that the contract wasn't taken away. It had expired naturally, and they weren't allowed to renew it because, as I say, Fremantle was going to remake The Tomorrow People as a big budget show. And I tell the story about why that doesn't happen as well. The stories were removed from sale basically as soon as the contract expired, and they've never been available since. So I give a fairly detailed description of what those stories were, and there was an ongoing arc which ran over the, I think, 5 years of the Big Finish story. So that's explained, and also where that arc would have gone, because it was, as I say, there was another year of it left to run. So the Big Finish adventures ended on a hell of a cliffhanger. It was brilliant. And then the next series would have been even more brilliant, because all of the old Tomorrow People were going to come back again, and it was going to be just like the old days. And it never happened. So we will be telling the story about what would have happened had this series continued. And then also beyond that, there was going to be another arc, because I think originally it was going to run for 9 years. So there's another arc which I talk about, which would have continued after the first one had finished. So yeah, there's an awful lot to say about the Big Finish adventures. But the biggest thing to say about them is it's such a shame that they never got to continue, because they were fantastic.
And something they've always wanted us to make absolutely clear is that it wasn't a question of losing the license.
No,
it was just purely one of those things that they just couldn't continue with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it had run its course. The contract was up for renewal, and legally Fremantle weren't able to grant that renewal. Terrible shame.
It is. And I think that's us done here, actually. I don't know how we're doing for time, but
4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Oh, that's
Any
good.
questions?
Well, that's how long we've done, or that's how long we've got left? We're
Tape
done.
runs out.
I can do this all day.
Right, who's going to sing?
Anybody got any questions?
Yes.
Tomorrow People book out?
Oh,
Very good question. Thank you.
good, very, very
Thank you
good
very
question.
much indeed. It's the 40th anniversary of The Tomorrow People is April next year. So the book will be out in April next year. The actual 40th anniversary is at the very, very end of April.
April.
So I'm giving it. I'm going to be going up to the wire because I've got a lot more writing to do. But yeah, April next year is when the book is due.
To give Andy his due, that probably will happen. I seem to recall when we said the Carry On book,
Yeah.
you hit your release date exactly a year from when you said you'd do it, so that was pretty good.
I'm an obsessive as you know, I'm a very obsessive person, and I will make my deadlines. I've never missed one yet.
Something we're not doing now is taking pre-orders on titles, so even though we announce them, we won't be doing the pre-orders anymore, because certain parties have made it a bit of a grey area. So people aren't terribly trusting a pre-order. So now we're going to, once the book's gone to the printers, we'll open it up for orders. But yeah, because we don't want to keep people hanging around on pre-orders that they paid for and then have to wait months and months for the book to come out if something goes wrong. Which actually something went right with our Doomwatch book, but it was March it was due to come out, and we just got lucky, had something extra to put into it, and had to put it back until September. And then thanks to the printers, it didn't come out till October.
I should also add, by the way, as Matt says, we won't be doing any pre-orders for the Tomorrow People, but if you go to facebook.com/jaunt, we have a page on Facebook where I'm updating the progress of the book as it goes along, and also sharing some of the fantastic items of sort of trivia and photographic archive material that I'm uncovering along the way. So facebook.com/jaunt if you'd like to find out more about the book.
Plenty of look-in scans.
Plenty of looking scans, yes, plenty of looking scans.
Any other questions? No?
How's Andy ex-Cable, and is he going to be doing more?
He was supposed to be coming.
Yeah, he was supposed
Yeah.
to. Andy has got, with some friends, a book coming out next year
Right.
for the anniversary, but it's not terribly firmed up at this present stage. So.
He gets easily lost, doesn't he? So
He
that's
does
probably
get-
why he
he
hasn't
does.
made it yet.
And he
might
has
turn up.
contributed we may as well say this. I mean, it's not something that, I don't know if you've heard of a book called You and Who that was supposed to be coming out from Hearst Books 2 years ago, which is it's a fan-written book, so it's lots of fans contributing to a charity volume, which now you've seen loads of, but 2 years ago when this was started was unheard of, so
Yeah.
it's slightly frustrating. We've now taken that off Hearst, and we'll be doing that in probably next month, and Andy's contributed to that as well. But and Andy has contributed to that as well.
And you have to.
Yes, I
You
have.
to, yes.
But
you haven't.
That'll be out next month. That's a charity one, or Children in Need, I think it's for, isn't it?
Yeah.
I haven't actually checked which charity it's for. We just
Where's
took
the
it.
man to ask?
J.R. Southall, there he is. Yes, JR over in the corner there edited it. And yeah, that should be out very, very soon. We
Which
hope
is
to get
great.
that
It's been a
before
long time
Christmas
coming, but it's brilliant news.
with a nice new cover.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
1 minute to go.
1 minute.
I thought that was going to be a
Anything else
question.
you want- Yeah, I know. Come on, Kevin. one
Damn
more
you,
question.
Kevin.
I don't think it's compulsory to fill every bit of.
Yeah, no.
So it's
I
okay.
think we're probably done. As we say, all the books are upstairs. We've got all of them on sale. We've got the new Doomwatch book, which only came out last week, which is the complete history of Doomwatch, and it's very complete. Michael's done a heck of a job on that.
Yeah.
And we've also got the book of 6 Doomwatch scripts for episodes that don't exist in the archives, and that's done incredibly well. I must admit I was surprised. I wasn't sure it would perform, but it's opened us up to possibly printing more scripts for items that aren't in the archives, and we're talking to a lot of authors' estates, unfortunately, because a lot of the authors aren't with us anymore, looking for permission to reproduce their scripts. So we're hoping to do that for other programmes missing from the archives.
And if
Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.